and welcome. I'm Shar, and this is Knee Deep in Relationship, and we are here to talk about all things relationship-y. Today we're going to cover something that is extremely emotional for me and something that affects my everyday life, and that is my relationship with my autistic son, or rather my position as a mother of a child with special needs or with a mental health disorder. I don't think anyone can really prepare you for experiencing something like this. I think that it's probably the hardest thing that I myself have ever had to do. His future is constantly on my mind. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about what life is going to be like for him. Will he go to college? Will he ever have a relationship or a wife? Will he be able to drive a car or hold a job? All of these things I think about every single day of my life, which every parent does, obviously. Every parent worries about the future of their child. I guess in that regard, I'm no different. What having autism means for my son is that he was a typical child until around the age of 3. When he tried to communicate with us, he wasn't able to. He had his own language and he would become frustrated, and with that frustration came rage. And he found ways to make us understand that he was in need. He was in need of help. And so I've always kind of known. It wasn't until he was about 9 years old that they would diagnose him, but there were so many signs. And I would tell his pediatrician and the many, many counselors that he would speak with, or the schools that he was kicked out of, that he had some non-neurotypical behaviors, such as he would get extremely irritated when there was a lot of noise around him, or if the lights were extra bright, or if there was someone tapping or kicking or picking at him. And I would notice when he would play with other children, he had a hard time understanding when they were done. He would laugh it off like it was some kind of a joke, but really they were done playing with him. And there have been several occasions where that was dangerous to him. One case, we were at the beach and him and a bunch of friends were playing ball out deeper in the lake, and the kids were all dunking each other. Well, my son thought it was funny that he could do this and not get in trouble. And so he continued to dunk the other children, and over half of them were girls. And he didn't know the difference. He was probably 7, and he got carried away, and one of the children got hurt, and all of the children ganged up on him and started drowning him in the lake. Thank God I was within yelling distance and I could actually stop it from happening. But the parents didn't understand. They didn't understand why my child, hurt their kid. Obviously, he did not mean to do that. It's just, that's what happens when kids are playing and one of them doesn't understand boundaries or social cues. This is why I worry for him, for his future. That was only him at age 7, and now he is almost 15, and the dangers to him are so much worse, and the consequences are so much more dire. He's been on medication since he was age 5. There's the worry that he could become addicted to these medications and never have a normal life, or he may not take them. And then what happens to him when I'm not around to help keep him out of trouble or help others understand his issues? We see all these advertisements, especially since COVID, for all of these mental health facilities that are offering to help people who are in crisis. There's hotlines and suicide prevention, and I've had experiences where I've had to utilize those services. And I can tell you, They have failed him every time. And I'm not just saying that as a parent of somebody with a mental health crisis. I'm saying that as a person who experienced it alongside of him, locked up inside an institution, waiting for a room where they were supposed to be counseling him and they were supposed to be helping him with his issues. And all they cared about was getting him away from other people, making sure he didn't hurt anyone else. And I get that is important. And I am sure that there are people out there that when they flip all the way and they do hurt people. But I know my son, and I know that he is compassionate. He does have feelings and he does care about the things that he's done. But when he's in that mode and he's in that crisis, he just can't control his emotions. I've heard therapists try to explain it in such a way that it's like an animal that's cornered and literally go into, I am going to fight my way out of this or I'm going to run away. And those are the only two things that he can consider when he's in crisis. He will either run or he'll fight. And when he fights, now that he is 6 foot something, he hurts people. It doesn't take him very long at all, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then he feels bad about what he's done. He feels bad about the way he's behaved. And he is sorry for hurting the people that he hurts. I know that he's not doing it intentionally, but it is a strain on our family, and it's a strain on my relationship with my husband. My marriage has been in danger, and I've lost several jobs trying to manage his needs. And I'm not saying all of this for pity. I actually think that maybe there are more people out there experiencing this. I was on Facebook today and I read a comment from a mom that said something to the effect of that her son was a mouthy a-hole. And I said, wow, that's so similar to my own situation. And I was like, you know what? I think I need to talk about this on the podcast. I really think maybe my pain and my experience might help someone else feel maybe not so alone. I don't know that I can help you because I obviously haven't figured it out myself, but having other people understand where you're coming from and, that it can help. We have spent so many years in therapy, all kinds of therapy too. We've done the ABA therapy, the occupational therapy, speech therapy, the talk therapy, play therapy, you name it, we have done it. And he has been on every medication that they have for impulse control, attention deficit, and mood stabilizer there is. We've tried different combinations and cocktails. They stop being effective. And then we start all over again. We have to look for a new medication or a new cocktail that will work for his behaviors. And I know that he's going to have to do this for the rest of his life. Even after we're gone, he's going to have to help himself. He's going to have to figure out how to get his own medication and make his own therapy appointments. As much as I'd like to protect him for the rest of his life, I know I'm not going to be around that long. I just have to think practically about it. Somehow I have to get through to this kid that he has to be responsible for his own actions and consequences because of the decisions that he makes. And how do I do that? How do I teach that to someone who doesn't understand complex concepts and ideas and has no forethought at all? Not to mention that, according to this article I'm reading about my Asperger child, aggression runs in families, and I sure as hell come from an aggressive family. I've been abused my whole life, and most days I feel like I'm still being abused. I know it's not always his fault. I know that he becomes overcome with emotions, but it is hard to live with someone who is constantly yelling at you, who doesn't ever listen to what you ask him to do, who doesn't follow the consequences that you lay down, and who can physically overpower you at any moment with his 6'2", 280-pound body. And I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of y'all that are like, put him in military school. Believe me, I've heard it all. I've heard it several times from people that are close to me. That is probably the worst thing you could do for him. Trying to force him to be neurotypical isn't going to help anybody. My personal belief is that people who have mental health issues need compassion and kindness, and they need someone who can put their needs in perspective and give them what they need when they need it. Parenting a child with special needs has taught me so much that I never would have experienced had I not had this opportunity to be his mom. And I am so thankful for that. I have learned how to look at life with a whole different perspective. In trying to help him, I have read so many books and articles and magazines, and that's really helped me to try to understand what he goes through, trying to communicate with us, especially during an incident. When I look at him, I can always tell when they're coming. He gets sort of this crazy eye look. He intensely looks at you with sort of a hard face. His fists get balled up, his face gets bloodshot, his neck gets red, and his whole body tenses up. And so I can see when he's getting agitated and he cannot take anymore. That's when I'll offer him a break and I'll tell him we're going to pause our conversation for now and we're going to come back to it later. But I didn't have those skills with my other children. I have 4 children total, and he's my second youngest child. So I didn't have the skills before him to handle someone with those kinds of needs. I am really sorry that it's taken me this long to get here, and I really wish that I knew this beforehand. You know, maybe if I had shown some patience back then, my older kids wouldn't think I was so mean. Let's not get carried away with all my regrets, or we would be here all day. My biggest problem right now is that when we need help with him, there is no help to be had. When he is in crisis and he is destroying a room or beating his head against a wall or punching himself in the face, I have no one to call. If I call the crisis hotline, they lock him up. If I take him to the doctor, they lock him up. If I call his therapist, they ask me to take him to the hospital. And it's just a cycle over and over again. There is no one who wants to help me. His therapist will tell me, call anytime. You text me if something goes wrong. We can do emergency televisits if necessary. And then when it comes right down to it, and I make that phone call or I make that text and I say he is in crisis, I get something to the effect of, it's outside of my business hours, or we'll see you at your next scheduled appointment. There is no crisis care for these kids. Someday, they are going to have to grow up and be adults. And if we can't help them in their time of need when they're asking for it, then what good are we? And how are we to expect that it's going to be any better as they get older? These kids who have these issues need to be supported by the community as a whole, by our society, by our government. It needs to be addressed. It is an epidemic. Last week, we had an incident where the police were involved. And when that happens, you have to come up with a safety plan. And my plan of action was to get him in with a new therapist. He's already seeing a psychiatrist. He's already seeing an ABA therapist. But I need him to get in with someone who does patient care. Talk therapy, if you will. I call